We are caught up with winning an entire life's battle. How many understand that sometimes we just have to win battles day by day? Because every day presents its own trouble, and enough of it for that matter. Now, when we talk about characteristics that follow those that worship God in spirit and in truth, I will not get into a whole lot because that will be here for a long time, and I don't want to bore you with that. I'm going to look at just two before I sit down and we continue listening to the wonderful music and the festivities tonight. When Jesus approaches this woman, the Samaritan woman, and the first thing when he asks her of a cup of water to drink, what does she say? She says, "You, a Jew, have no right to ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink of water." Right there, she raises a prejudiced attack on Jesus, or rather a prejudiced resistance to Jesus only asking a cup of water. And the thing that you need to understand when you look at this portion of scripture is that when we are true worshipers, we cannot walk in prejudice of any kind, whether it is racial prejudice, tribal prejudice, gender prejudice. We have not worshipped God enough until if we are still stuck on those prejudicial issues. Because when you know God and worship Him in spirit and in truth, some of the things that He begins to confront in your life is that every human being is actually made in His likeness and in His image. So that's one of the things that I've dealt with in the book, and I hope when you read it, I've expanded it and given many examples where prejudice comes in and how we can overcome it. The other thing that I'll close with tonight is this Samaritan woman, when Jesus is asking her that draw me some water, he says, "Look, what are you going to draw this water with?" Even our father Jacob that dug this well in, okay, is past, but what are you going to use to draw this water? This woman was caught up in limitation. Now, when you're a true worshiper, one of the characteristics that you begin to walk in is limits begin to drop off of your life, because you begin to see God for who He is. When you begin to understand that the God that you worship is limitless, even your life you begin to walk in your life in a way that you begin to break limitation. A barracuda, for those of you that know that fish, is a predatory fish. It's got sharp teeth because it feeds on other fish. How many know about the Australian barracuda? It's a huge fish and it feeds on other fish, and it's got very, very sharp teeth. In an experiment, they put two jars next to jars of water, like what you have in your homes, like two fish ponds, or is that what you call them? Fish tanks. So in one fish tank, they put a barracuda that feeds on other fish. In another fish tank, they put fish that actually the barracuda can feed on. Now, in the experiment, whenever the barracuda would want to attack the other fish to eat, it kept hitting the tank because it was glass. Okay? And it did it so many times that the barracuda just gave up because of the barrier, the glass. Then the people that were doing the experiment, they actually took the fish, which was its food, from the other tank and actually threw it in the same tank where the barracuda was. But because the barracuda had been fighting limitations so much, it wanted food but it was limited all the time, even when the food was actually thrown in its own tank, the barracuda was just looking. Why? Because in its mind, it was still limited with the fact that there is glass and I can't access my food. And that is what the power of limitation does in our lives. And I've dealt with an entire chapter on limitation in my book. Most of us, we have struggled, and the struggle is real. But the problem with struggling consistently and continuously is that even when your circumstances begin to change, you don't notice it because you are stuck on limitation. You still feel that your circumstances are limited even when the fish is in the exact tank as the barracuda. All it needs to do is open up its mouth and catch its prey and eat. So the barracuda would actually die of hunger when its food is actually now in the same fish tank. And I pray that that's one of the things when you read the book that you begin to, no matter what it is, and the struggle, like I said, is real. You may have started a business at some time or whatever it is, and you may have failed repeatedly, maybe school or whatever your advancement you feel you must make. And because you have failed so many times, failure has actually done what? Limited you. Such that even when opportunities come, the doors that you've been hitting on for so many years have eventually opened, your mind is still limited and stuck with limitation. There are other things that I've dealt with in terms of the characteristics of things that you're going to see in your life when you begin to walk in true worship, when you're worshiping God in spirit and in truth. And I'll leave that to so that you can buy the book instead of me explaining the whole book, because then you'll not buy a copy. But it's good material, and even in my own life, I gotta end with this little testimony. What I'm doing today, I didn't start now. So some of the people that know me, God and government, I did it in Zambia maybe over 20 years ago. But if you saw that little book, I took it to one of the victory conferences in Lusaka. I think that was 1993. It was poorly done. You know, I took it to a printing press in Ndola, okay? I think it was maybe 30 pages, but I felt I was an author there, okay? I took it there, it did, you know, I probably sold maybe 2-3 copies, okay? I thought I was gonna sell 1,000 that day, okay? And from that moment, I never wrote anything. Then in 2011, right here in the US, I just started beginning to feel some kind of stirring to write, okay? And I just jumped on it. The first time I did the first book, I was happy to just get published. The second and third, I'm seeing that I'm growing feathers little by little. Okay, it's like the dry bones, and they're coming together little by little. Flesh is coming on it little by little. And I'm just telling you that watch this space. It's not about me, but I'm trying to encourage somebody that it's not where you start, but where you're gonna end up. Follow your dream and keep going. So break away from limitation and just begin now. And the chances is that whatever you're gonna start doing now, maybe it's not a new thing. God is just gonna increase what He has already given you. The gifting is already in you. Some of us have to go back dig and dig out the old wells. You know, Jacob, and I said I was closing, but I think I need to say this. Jacob, whenever he, you know, wells were, and I have a chapter on wells in the book, so it's appropriate that I say something in 2 minutes before we go. Water was very, very scarce in modern biblical days, and it used to be a source of conflicts because out of wells, that's where they were getting water for domestic use and animal consumption. And Jacob, each time he dug a well, his enemies would come and they would fight over the well, and he would give it up and move on to another well. He digs another one. The enemies come. Sometimes they would actually come and bury the wells with water. They just with soil. He dug the well. His enemies come and they just fill his well of water with soil. Okay? And then they will move on to another place so that they can dig, have water for sustenance as humans, but also for their animals. And sometimes our lives feel like that. Like you started, when it looks like it's making headway, something happens, you've registered for class. After 4 months, you gotta stop. Something comes up, your work schedule changes. But finally, when he went into a small place called Rehoboth, when they dug that well, Rehoboth was a very small place. But when they dug that well, Jacob said, the Lord has granted us what? Rest in Rehoboth. Because at that point, God had dealt with their enemies and they couldn't attack them anymore.